Live. Good
Hey.
evening. Um, Good evening to our RISE supporters, our RISE community, ladies and gentlemen. Whether you are joining us live on Facebook, on X, on YouTube, and welcome to, I think I can call this a special edition Fireside Chat. These usually happen on Saturday evenings, but we thought, you know what, there is someone we haven't spoken to, and we absolutely can't go into election day without having spoken to our national spokesperson and
So we
getting
have to
to
do it on a Friday.
we had to bring it to you on a Friday because we need to get to know the woman behind the voice, the woman behind the statements,
Oh my God.
and just get to know the person behind Gugu Ndima, get to know her journey, her politics, and how she comes to be a part of this group of really incredible but crazy people who
And I
believe
hope
that.
risers are pleasantly surprised that, oh my God, those harsh statements. No, that face doesn't look like that.
There's a friendly face
You
behind all of those
know?
hard-hitting statements. So thank you for joining us on a Friday evening.
Thank you, Dimpho.
This is not a one-way conversation, so please
Mhm.
feel free to engage with us, to send us
Okay.
questions, to send us comments. We're only 5 days before the election, so perhaps also just let us know how you're feeling and how excited you are to be voting for new leaders, to be
You know,
voting.
Dimpho, I cannot believe we actually here as South Africa, as a country,
Yeah.
myself also to be part of the belly of the beast.
Yeah.
I said, I took a 5-year hiatus away from politics for personal
Mm,
reasons. And politics has never been a career choice. I think politics chose me, I never
mhm,
chose it. And for some reason, I always find myself in the heat, of the moment. And being here at this time, one has been challenging,
mm,
but it's also been such an honor. The team that I've met amongst the community, the RISE Mzansi community, whether it's at work,
yeah.
volunteers, organizers, it's been so humbling. The hard work, the work ethic at RISE Mzansi is unmatched. Like these people are machines.
I tell, I had a conversation with a friend, had a conversation with my mom. Each
Yeah.
time someone asks me how I'm doing, I say, this is the hardest I've ever worked in my
And
life. And
starting
I,
at a time where it was right, as you said, 30 days. For me, I think I've been here about 3 weeks now.
yeah,
And just going in, getting into the deep end, learning how to swim, and at times finding, okay, am I
yeah,
paddling, in the right or the
yeah.
wrong place? But the support, the people that work, the
Mm,
community, and just people saying, listen, we'll support you. We know you're going through it, but let's just go through it together. Whether you're in tears, but it's been so humbling. It's exceptional. Also being part of something new, something everyone is anxious and excited about with respect to how it's going to work, what will be the outcome. No one knows, everybody's going to be looking at, for the first time, RISE Mzansi is part of an election. What
mm,
is the outcome? So every little thing, every work, every contribution does matter towards, contributing towards RISE Mzansi. So for me, that's been humbling. It's been an interesting experience, but I'm still alive. I'm still breathing despite the flu, the fatigue, the exhaustion. And I'm just glad we've been able to take it here. One of my biggest actually anxieties was the People's Rally. And
mm.
you know how South Africans are so preoccupied and obsessed with numbers, not knowing the work behind it, not knowing all the engagements in communities,
Yeah.
people we've spoken to. So it's like, okay, there's the strength. Will you be able to fill up the stadium? Because that's just been the supposed test. But for that to happen, and knowing that everyone played their part, contributed to ensure that that stadium is full, was something phenomenal for me to say, look, here, legitimately, this has happened. These are the people that support RISE Mzansi. And the work behind it, people who contributed to ensure that that day happens. And no one will know the weeks, the meetings, behind that, and see those beautiful pictures there. But it's been worth it, and it's been quite a great experience.
Yeah. Speaking about the hard work that goes into an election campaign, but I think you mentioned the extra hard work that I think everyone has to put in because RISE Mzansi is new. But I'm glad that you mentioned the support and the care. One of the things that we speak about and that we emphasize on at RISE Mzansi is the politics of care. And it has to start with each other. The people who work at RISE Mzansi, the organizers, the volunteers, and it needs to flow from that. But we'll get into the politics of RISE Mzansi. And what about this new kid on the block, so to speak, drew you back into politics after a 5-year hiatus? But before we get into that, some people do know your background in activism, your background in politics, but for the benefits of those who maybe came across this name Gugu Ndima for the first time a couple of weeks ago when you were introduced as the national spokesperson of RISE Mzansi, just take us through who Gugu is. Where did she come from? Where was she born? Where was she raised? You know, where person that we see who's become Gugu Ndima actually come from?
Yeah, she's a collage of so much, but just in context, I'm from Katlehong. I was born and raised there. My mom is from Katlehong, my father Vosloorus. I'm the firstborn. I think that's also another trait that's very important in politics. But I'm a firstborn. It's 2 daughters. My sister is an economist. And yeah, with regards to politics, I started very young, from student politics, activism. One of my first opportunities, especially in political communications, was being a spokesperson in the Young Communist League. The national secretary at that time was Buti Manamela. People know him as the Deputy Minister of Higher Education. I worked quite well there, and I think that was the first opportunity I got with respect to being exposed. But I had been active in the ANC Youth League for quite some time. I served in the ANC Youth League region in Ekurhuleni. And yeah, I grew quite organically in the PYA structures. Then communications, for some reason, became something, I don't know, I didn't even gravitate to it. I found myself in that space. So just, for example, by being in the Young Communist League, I started writing. So it's one of my passions as well. I started writing articles, contributing in the Times Live, Sunday Times, Mail and Guardian, thought leadership. And that developed a skill and a passion that I didn't realize I had. I never studied for communications. So I continued at that. And was also invited to contribute. I've got chapters in certain books. In politics, there's also Liberation Diaries that's coming out in June. I've contributed a chapter there. And then I got into government. So subsequently, after the Young Communist League, I worked in communications in the ANC caucus, in the Gauteng Provincial Legislature. I've worked in an MEC's office, and the last was the executive mayor's office in the city of Ekurhuleni. And it was within the political communication space. But one would also contribute in terms of writing. So, for example, the African Communist in the South African Communist Party, I was part of the editorial team at that time. So writing became an intense passion. And then, yeah, I continued. And the last job I had, which took me to exile, was also communications, but pretty much in the background in the Gauteng Growth and Development Agency. And yeah, I was there for about 3 years before someone said, listen, you need to be part of this new baby. So in essence, that's what I've been. Oh, I'm a mother as well, a single mom to a beautiful son who plays rugby. I've been missing a couple of his games. Yes, so I'm a single mom to a beautiful son. It's just been him. No, I'm not married. But yeah, that's just been my life. And yeah, communications, as I've said, I've also got a form of escape, which is fiction. I've got a book titled All in a Girl's Life that's also available at Exclusive Books. And it's about 5 women and what they go through. I believe that has been my therapy. for the longest of time. I've expressed my other side, the side of myself, through these 5 different characters, and just things that I've experienced as a woman in South Africa, as a person, relationships, finances, things that society expects of you. And that's my escape. I'm actually publishing a sequel to that book in August. So that, in essence, is my life. But I've been active all along. Despite being in communications, I've been an activist within the ANC. And then when I decided to take the break, the hiatus, was just looking at some of the things that were happening in the organization, which I felt I did not resonate with. And I retreated. So it wasn't exit, find something else, but it was a personal decision. At that time, RISE Mzansi was not there. It was just all the things that were happening, which I did not agree with.
Yeah. And we're going to get into that decision. And I imagine it's not an easy one, especially having to make the decision to leave an organization that almost formed your political identity, right? And taught you how to express your political voice, and just the boldness to decide, actually, what's happening here does not resonate with me. I'm going to leave. But I want us to touch a little bit on your author side, because I think it's so special that, apart from writing bold statements and writing on thought leadership and current affairs, reflecting on where we find ourselves, and in particularly as young people and as women in our country, I think it's also quite cool that you have this fun size where you write about fiction. But before I talk about the book, I want us to maybe reflect on some of the writings that are the most memorable to you. When you think about thought leadership, when you think about where the country was at the time, the kind of aspirations that we had, maybe some of the challenges that we're going through, what do you remember writing at that time? What stands out for you? Yeah.
I'll actually give you all the writings as well as things that I've done.
Yeah.
I've never been an apologist when it comes to what I believe in. And if it means I have to stand out and say something which makes other people uncomfortable, so be it. I will constructively also criticize. So some of the writings which I found quite prominent was the state in which the ANC was going. There's an article in the Sunday Independent I had, and I termed this, there was this concept of kakistocracy, which says a government that always advances the worst instead of the best. And it made, headlines. How can you say that when you are part of the structure? I once also wrote about the state of the Women's League, saying that it doesn't advance some of the issues women have, yet it is a league of an organization that is in government, and the ageism in it. And I remember someone saying, no, Gugu must be suspended, but I wasn't a member of the Women's League because I didn't believe in the concept. I don't believe that you should have a league when women have to be an integral part of the organization. So those were some of the things. But a highlight, which wasn't just the writing, was Occupy Luthuli House. You can Google it. It was 2016, and the ANC had lost one of the biggest metros in Gauteng. So that was the city of Joburg and Ekurhuleni. And a lot of people had raised issues prior to that, look, the ANC is going a certain way. And what we had proposed as a young generation at that time, it was Sasabona, Lamula, some of the people that we led Occupy Luthuli House with, was to say, why don't you disband the NEC, but get veterans, people that are credible, who've got nothing to lose, who don't have any aspirations of leading or standing for leadership. Why don't you have those people lead the ANC towards an early conference? So be able to go and stabilize the structures, because factionalism had been highly institutionalized. So the president at that time was becoming more powerful than the ANC in itself. That was former President Jacob Zuma, and look at where we are now. So we had proposed that. We were called charlatans. We were labeled, when you're the woman, you always kind of glaring. How dare you? You get insulted and all that. But it's something I stand very firmly and confidently for, because I look at what has happened today and the fact that the very president we were saying has done certain things in the organization now has opened another organization, and it's become an even bigger problem for the ANC. I feel, vindicated to say this is what we stood for. So in principle, I believe that if you know that you are not on the wrong side of history, stand consistently with what you believe in. And I even said it post that, I said, we've become such a hedonist organization, cross materialism. You go there and you've got bikers and Mini Coopers in poor communities, and it's a display of cross materialism. And look at what it has done consequently later in the years. People just look at this as a display of opulence, arrogance from leadership, as opposed to being considerate of the constituency that you serve. For the longest of time, the ANC was considered an organization that was biased to the working class and the poor. But you look at the conditions today, would you actually have or say the same thing? And people will say opportunistically, well, every organization has its challenges. But when challenges are perennial and they continue to be challenges, and there's no one who's actually saying we're remedying it, it becomes a problem. I say you've got political reports and organizational reports from the ANC that speak about these current issues, and they're gathering dust. So it's not that people don't know what the issue is. They know that money is a serious issue. Patronage, factionalism, and also the superseding character or power of the president over the organization, presidents who don't get held accountable. And you see that it becomes a pattern. So if you get to that point, and worse, by a generation that feels entitled by virtue of the fact that they've got struggle credentials, you're never going to get anywhere. And those were one of the things I personally felt strongly about. I wrote about them. So anyone knows that I didn't run through the back door, but I've always emphasized how I feel and what my views were.
Sure. So, just to say, I remember briefly Occupy Luthuli House. I was quite young at the time. I think I was 21. But in preparation,
my age.
In preparation for this, I went back and I watched some of those interviews, and I just remember how unrelenting you were. I just remember how confident you were. Like you're saying right now, that these are things that you had a deep conviction about, and you were not afraid to talk about them, and not just to be vocal about it, but you were even willing to write about them so that they stand the test of time, right? Like there's a record of Gugu Ndima speaking out about these things within that particular organization. But I'm also hearing your kind of leadership philosophy coming through, the ideals of being honest, being able to reflect, being able to hold power to accountable. The socialist values that come through, that we can't just go into communities and display wealth, and then claim to be a socialist party. What are some of your leadership ideals, or what's your leadership philosophy? If someone had to ask Gugu to define leadership,
I'll go back to also the ANC leaders that inspired me, and it's not leaders that we've met. And a pedigree that I say in society will always be grateful for beyond the ANC. So OR Tambo, even the founder of the ANC, Pixliga Isagaseme, he was 30 years of age. But for the fact that he was the founder but didn't become the president at that time, if you look at the patience and the persistence of OR Tambo when the ANC was going through some of the worst times, I always say that the democratic DNA is that of OR Tambo. So in the constitutional embodiment of South Africa, OR Tambo still lives there. And what breaks my heart is that you still have great leaders within the ANC, but because of this erosion, the politics of numbers and confrontation, they've actually placed them aside. There are people that I've always looked up to, for example, like Paxtal, that generation. It's people that I say, this is the pedigree I wish could have just ascended at a certain time. But we're in a different time and space. A leader should be able to stand in the background and say, let me allow others to lead. In fact, it's something I've realized with the current leader of RISE Mzansi, Songezo Zip. And I say, he might be in the position that he's in today, but I think he's going to inspire more leaders in society, given the character of the person, and someone who has confidence in people, even if they don't have confidence in themselves. And I speak from a personal point of view, and I say, you know what, this has been big shoes to fill. Spokesperson, it's an organization that is going into elections. People will be looking at it in various ways, but to say that, look, I have confidence, I've seen your work before, and I believe that you can do it. But I think he's doing that for a whole lot of people, given the young people that are in RISE Mzansi, who have just ascended and who have not been in politics for that matter. You look at Western Cape, Akolila, you look at Usis Vuyisa, Usis Nonkulego. There are so many even in the office. So he has these traits, this character of a leader who'll say, I can step back and allow people to grow and evolve without feeling intimidated or without feeling threatened, And he's tried so hard to shy away from RISE Mzansi being embodied through him. And I think that's one of the distinct characters of RISE Mzansi, to say no one actually, even if they know who he is, but it's okay, let me actually listen to what he has to say. It's not someone we know who's a populist, because he's never drowned in populist rhetoric. He might be firm on his stances, but he's one of those leaders you can actually listen to and say, okay, I think I can do better. And it's an inspiration that I've also got just being in this space for 3 weeks. It's not someone I spend a lot of time with, but just in the short time listening to him, being able to see how he works, it says, this person is definitely going to create leaders for the future. RISE Mzansi has a chance of growing because it's become some kind of school for leadership in future. So yeah, I'm excited. And for me, it's one of the reasons why I joined RISE Mzansi. It's that philosophy and actually seeing it in action. So it's not something I just saw in paper, but the people as well that it's attracted. One of the people that I also grew up with at RISE Mzansi, just in youth politics, is Makashule Ghana. One of the most inspirational, hardworking people I've met, and Kume as well. When I saw these people join RISE, I said, you know what? Clearly there is some ethic, there is some sense of patriotism to do this. These are people I know who love the country. These are people I know who love their people, who work within their communities. So clearly there's something they sincerely believe in. And I know they wouldn't join something they didn't believe in or thought, okay, it might disappear at some point. But also for them knowing that we've got a common value in terms of loving our country and wanting to see the best. That's one of the reasons also I joined. So those type of leaders for me, who are not threatened or intimidated, who are not populists, but get things done, and in the process of getting things done, inspire some people like us.
Yeah. I actually want us to go back to all the fireside chats we've had and just do a montage of every time someone describes the culture of leadership at RISE Mzansi, they say exactly that.
Good.
How there is just a culture of sharing power, that nobody is trying to be the main character, nobody is trying to hog the mic. Everyone is there because collectively we all want to build the country that we deserve. We speak about a safe, prosperous, equal, and united South Africa.
And just on that,
yeah,
you know what I like about them? It's they look like the type, even if you want to hog the mic, they let you hog it, go get confused and say, okay, come back. Now that you've hogged the mic, come back
yeah,
to yourself. They've
yeah.
got those traits too.
What 100%, because that's exactly how everyone has described the leadership culture of RISE Mzansi, incredibly decentralized and very democratic. In fact, when I hosted Nonkululego on Fireside Chat, she said, down to the logo of RISE Mzansi, it was a consultation.
Yeah.
And everyone had to agree what would be the colors, in what order are they going to be arranged, what is it going to look like. And I absolutely agree as well with what you're saying about Usongezo. And I think how RISE Mzansi has almost become this incubator
Yes.
for young people.
The
For young
leadership academy.
100%. For people who
Yeah.
did not imagine that they could lead, but more importantly, lead
Mm.
politics, and even become public servants. But now that we've gotten here, I want us to go a little deeper and let's talk about some of the things that drew you to RISE Mzansi, because I
Yeah.
imagine you were a part of this big political organization, and you kind of retreat and you take a break for 5 years. I don't know what's going through your mind during this break. Are you thinking you'll ever make a return to electoral politics? Are you thinking, actually, I'm so traumatized, I'm done with this whole thing? And then someone approaches you and says, Gugu, we want you to join this mission of rebuilding South Africa, and we want you to be our national spokesperson. What's going through your mind? But most importantly, what are the things that ultimately make you say yes to
Okay.
this to this mission?
It's beautiful. All right.
Yeah.
So, my first interaction, in fact, I had conversations, as I've said, with people I know who've joined RISE as well. And I was skeptical, obviously, as you've said, when you've moved from an organization as big as the ANC, but also my family is in the ANC, My mother has just had to take knocks with her daughter deciding, But I recall saying to someone that, look, if I join RISE, know that I joined because I sincerely believe it, because it's also reputational. We are all putting everything into it. It's not an organization that is in government, but it's something that we believe in. One thing that actually became a distinct feature that made me feel, wow, this organization is how they started the process of consultation and towards the People's Declaration. I was there at Constitution Hill. I was fascinated by how many young people were there, right? People who genuinely believed in RISE Mzansi and contributing. So I was facilitating one of the sessions, and just how people were contributing and afforded that opportunity because it didn't fall into the traps. It wasn't malicious compliance. It's not something to just gather, thoughts and then just put it there or preconceived by an NLC. No, everybody contributed. You look at that People's Manifesto, and it's a manifestation of all the people who had been there. So that for me was so important. But again, that most people who actually were part of RISE didn't have political backgrounds or some burdens to say, listen, I'm tired, I'm from a breakaway fraction, I'm going to join RISE Mzansi. It's actually people who had been despondent with the realities, their own personal realities in the country, and said, look, we cannot stand aside, let's be part of something else. So when I was at the People's Convention, I got that sense. And that was really inspiring, right? I became reluctant, and I'll make this confession. I wish I had just joined earlier. And it was fear. I won't lie to you. And one of the other fears we have is that, look, you're sitting somewhere, you're in a government job. We tend to believe in stability more than anything. But I say, if that is not your calling or your purpose, you're going to get out of that stable environment, or God will drag you out at some point because you've got a bigger role to play. And downplaying yourself or simply pretending as if you're not part of the problem by not doing anything or by being complacent, you won't get away with it. As to how I decided this on the peak or the eve of elections, I look at myself in the mirror like, how could you do that to yourself, Google? This time is the worst. And it was a shocker to everybody, to myself personally, my family, and people who've known me in the ANC. So even if they know that I wasn't active, but the bold stance to say, not only am I going to be going there, yes, I will also speak on behalf of that organization, and I will boldly campaign, and I will tell you why I'm there. So that was a brave stance on my end. I still can't believe I did that, but it was necessary. I've always said in this time, especially these elections, they're not just elections. They're going to have to determine a lot of things. So even if it's not an immediate determination, but at some point, we all know that things have to change. The political culture, the politicians that represent us, but also generationally. I say we've got in South Africa, serious intergenerational antagonisms. The old that feels entitled to this democracy, who are starting to destroy this democracy, and the young who are not being born or who are not given an opportunity to take this country forward. So RISE Mzansi's genesis is a result of this time and space, this era where we're saying 2024 is our 1994, literally in every sense of the word. And what it means is that this is not a job of a politician or someone who's been in the ANC, who's got experience. No, it's every South African who wants to see things change and progress towards something else. We've become so accustomed to things going wrong, to a certain politician, rhetorical politician. I'm sorry to repeat this, but they call it buffoonery politics, where anyone who screams and stands out or say something rhetorical, then they become a politician. So there's no value in substance. There's no value in engagement. And I actually saw that when I was at my homecoming yesterday, the amount of young women who actually are concerned about realities, but they don't know where to go. They say, you can't go to this specific party because there's so much chauvinism. There's gatekeeping. People think you're there to want jobs. We don't know where to talk. We don't know what platforms there is. So RISE Mzansi has a very important role. And I said, rather being complacent, having your paycheck and say, oh, well, I'll complain about it on Twitter and get retweets. Go out there. And it's uncomfortable. The truth is, change is not comfortable. It's not easy. It can be so frustrating to a point that you're like, know what, I really want to give up. But if we give up, who's going to do it? We've got children that we're raising that are looking at us. Do something proud. When your child tells you, ask you tomorrow, what did you do when things go wrong? I'll say, I was in Occupy literally. On top of that, I came back and I joined RISE Mzansi. So I'm on the side of history of people who said, I will do something about it, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it makes a lot of people angry. Because it's not about pleasing, honestly. Politics is about getting into the space and getting into the belly of the beast and doing what is right. Yeah.
I don't know if I should clap. I really wish we had a horn. I really wish we had a horn. I love how passionately you speak about the need to be bold. And on RISE Mzansi's birthday, first birthday, I said on my Instagram, happy birthday to an idea whose time has come. And I love what you're saying about the fact that the birth of RISE Mzansi is as a result of what is desperately needed in South Africa's political culture. The need for honest engagement, the need for honest ethical leadership, reflective leadership, leadership that's not trying to hog the mic, leadership that's trying to
hog the purse. Hog the
purse. A different kind of leadership, and I think that speaks so perfectly even to our campaign messaging, which is around we need new leaders.
And sorry, babe, I just want to add something to that. In the 3 weeks that I've joined, I've never felt more inadequate, and I'll tell you why. I see everyone brings their best to the party, and like, okay, I want to be better. So being in this environment says, whatever happens, you will come out a better person. You're in the furnace. It is sometimes frustrating, but one thing I know for sure, amongst the people that I'm working around, it's people who inspire me to do better. It's people who inspire me to like, okay, take a book and read. That manifesto, take that policy and read it again because you need to perfect it. So I'm not in an environment of people who, push rhetoric or just want to sound appropriate or eloquent. They speak issues. Mandla Isaac, head of policy, will tell you things, facts and stuff. So I'm in an environment where I'm like, okay, Rusty, you've been cast. Come on, get a girl, And it's exciting. It's scary and exciting because it happens at a time where so much is happening. It's quite turbulent. But I'm also excited and inspired to say, now I'm at a point where I need to refine everything. So whether it's your writing skills, whether it's your articulation skills, whether it's your reading skills, take it to the next level. And it's something I feel every single day when I'm at RISE, like there's no chance to sleep. You listen to Nonkulego, Vuyiswa, Lawrence, Irfan, you're like, wake up.
I
or
love
even
that you
the
say
leader.
that. I
Yeah,
think it was Bitumelo Mpakanyane, our head of internal democracy,
yeah,
when we were at the Gauteng training for public representatives, RISE Mzansi
yes.
candidates. And
Mm,
he said, this is an organization that's constantly going to challenge you to do better
yeah,
and to be better. There is no way that you can be within the RISE Mzansi ecosystem, especially as a leader. And
yeah.
Google, I went and I bought a book. I think it's this thick on youth development because I said,
You know,
uh-uh.
and you know what I love? It's not those books of history, this and a third. Practically development. Let's
Yeah,
move forward. So you're like, okay. So Mieso was speaking about the whole policy, process in South Africa. So from Asgisa, da 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 da. Like, oh, National Growth Fund. He speaks of a RDP Act. Oh, was there? So you constantly have to be, up to date, and it's a good
yeah.
thing. It can never make you worse or anything. It actually refines your skills as a person, and you want to be better. I went to my first NLC, National Leadership Collective meeting, and someone warned me that it's going to take long. But when I sat there, it wasn't a meeting where you felt like leaving. All the contributions, everything everyone was talking about, you literally absorb, you forget even the time that you've spent a couple of hours, but you're like, wow, I gained this. Oh, I didn't know this. Or just even ways of putting things on the table. So this has been quite an experience. I feel like I'm in school. If I'm in school, I'm in an academy, and I am being trained every single day, just in terms of looking at how you guys do things, how RISE Mzansi does things, and always harnesses every single time I am learning to be better.
It's definitely a back to school. And you're not the
Yeah.
only one. I just want to say that we have all been challenged, and
Oh, I
RISE
thought I
is
was the only one right now.
not at all. I think, just the work ethic and the passion
Mm,
and the drive of the people at Rise and Zansi, from people who are part of the political leadership to people who actually run the machine, people who work at headquarters. There is a genuine desire to want to be better and do better. And I think that comes from the understanding that changing South Africa's political culture, changing the trajectory of our country is going
mm,
to demand the best from us. And so I think that's why we are also alive to this reality that there is this need for
yeah,
constant development. One of the
yeah,
things you spoke about, which I think is so important, is the fear of moving away from stability, the
yes,
fear of moving away from the known. And I
mm,
think a lot of people can relate to that,
yeah,
especially with Rise Mzansi being a group of people who were not in politics, people who never imagined politics as even a choice, right?
mm, mm.
Um, for their future, but deciding that, you know what, there's work that needs to be done. And if we don't do it, no one else
No one
is
else is gonna.
no one
Yes,
else is going to do it. And we're just going to keep standing from the sidelines shouting, but we're not going to see any real
change.
change. And just I want us to go. I don't know if I've defined the question in my
I
mind, but
get
I
you.
want us to stay there for a while. Especially I think for a lot of even young Black
Mm,
professionals,
mm.
people who have the capability to lead, the experience, the talent,
Yeah.
just feel like it's way too much
Mm,
to compromise, and they're afraid to kind of
mm.
leave the comfortable nest that they've created
Yeah.
for themselves,
Mm,
and do something as bold as joining a political party, and a smaller one at that.
mm.
Yeah.
Look, I'll actually give you an example. So, since I've joined RISE Mzansi, I'm pleasantly surprised at the number of people that inbox who are also members of the ANC who'll say, look, I actually like this organization. I even am considering splitting my vote. And the fear is genuine. Patronage, for the longest of time, has been utilized to intimidate the middle class. If you look at concepts such as dinzwalos, there's a sense of entitlement that we made you, and no doubt, there's contributions. But I say, to what end? So I'm part of the Black middle class, but we're not even owning anything, Dimpho. We are highly indebted. We're highly frustrated. We know that there are certain things that are not sustainable moving forward. And if we continue at this trajectory, we're going to be overtaxed. If something happens to government, a lot will be unemployed. Why aren't we building a black middle class, for example, that is self-sufficient, that grows outside being bureaucrats in government, that grows outside the confines of being tenderpreneurs? And you've created this class that is so fragile, that is so dependent, for example, on the state, that it cannot sustain outside of it. You can build this black middle class in corporate, in business, in saying that they need to be part of the value chain distribution in the economy. There's so much more to do. But because of this perverse idea that patronage must keep you at ransom, patronage must keep you at bay, a lot of people are scared. And sadly, some vote on the basis of the fact that I need to protect my personal number. I need to wear the ANC shirt and stand next to the leader so that I don't lose my job. But it's not how you keep these people. In fact, if you had created a solid middle class, black middle class, you wouldn't even have this problem of wondering whether you're going to get 50% or not. Because voluntarily they'll say, you've created this, or you've created these opportunities. I see a future for my children here. I see my children will be sustained, and therefore I will vote on that basis. It shouldn't be an intimidation. It's no different from saying, if we get out, you will not see, social grants. Why do you keep people at bay? There's nothing normal about having so many people, millions for that matter, who will be on the social grant. That's not an achievement. It says there's something wrong. You've not been able to create a workforce or a society that is self-sufficient, that can develop, So you've not created enabling opportunities to ensure that people can grow outside the confines of this government patronage. And that is dangerous because it's not sustainable. It's highly dependent on a strained fiscus, for that matter. And for how long? So you're going to start taxing these very same people, overtaxing them again, who are paying medical aid, who are bonded, who are mortgaged, all of that. And all of them say we are a paycheck away from being unemployed, right? Is that okay? Is that sustainable? So to anyone who's scared, look, your vote is your secret. But I know that a lot of them know the truth. A lot of them know these realities, and most of them are even kept out of leadership positions. So you find even the people that are leading them are people that they don't respect or feel that, but how come you're not taking the best to the front when you've got them within your organization? So those are frustrations a lot of people within the black middle class have, but unfortunately, even talking about them becomes such a problem because your entire life is at risk. Your entire livelihood is at risk, and you end up being exploited for that.
And the longer we continue to cower because our lives are at risk, the longer our lives will indeed be at risk. And the longer we will rely on the same people and the same system.
And your children will ask you, Mom, how come, why were you silent? You saw things going wrong, or why is it you saying that I should go to Dubai or England after matric? Because a lot of them are planning like that. Is it okay that we are planning futures outside of this country, this beautiful country? Are we saying that we've become so despondent, we don't want to be part of the solution? So the middle class is its own enemy, because it sits in these comforts that are uncomfortable, by the way, on the basis of short-term protection of their own personal interests. And it's not sustainable.
I think that Umzamo in the comments has said it perfectly when he says ours is nothing but a pseudo-black middle class, which is highly indebted. He also says, I am exceedingly impressed by RISE Mzansi's humility and its leader's simplicity. Keep it up, guys. Politics doesn't have to be complicated. And I want us to talk about that, I think, later on in the conversation. This idea that politics in South Africa has looked a certain way, and that it has to stay that way. One of the comments I think I see a lot on social media is, oh, these ones are so soft. Shem.
Oh, these Chinese, they're so
These guys
liberal.
have such a twang. Politics
Rebecca's
is not.
ground forces. I've heard
Yeah,
it all.
yeah, yeah. These ones are the tag. I don't know if they're going to survive, and why we have believed and normalized this idea that politics can only look a certain way, it can only sound a certain way, and I think even more dangerously that politics has to be brutal. And Frida says, being in RISE Mzansi, you get to level up your knowledge. Such amazing leaders to learn from. And personally, I am grateful. 100% Frida. Frida is our incredible coordinator of the arts in Gauteng.
Thanks, Frida.
And so she just works with artists all across the province who are a part of the RISE Mzansi network.
She's part of the Debza crew. She's part of the Debza crew.
She's part of the Debza crew. I'm sure you've seen Frida if you've been to a Gauteng event. One of the things you mentioned, and this is something I was reflecting on this week, is that I'm really grateful to be in this journey with people who are mothers. I think that there is a certain way that mothers think about politics that someone who isn't a mother often does. I was having a conversation with someone who is a candidate for RISE Mzansi. She's on the Gauteng provincial list.
Nice.
And she said, "No, Dimpho, I don't want us to get to make quick fixes when it comes to our economic challenges. Because if we borrow any more money today, my daughter is going to be working to pay off that debt."
Yeah.
And it just struck me that, mothers in politics think differently.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important to get those voices in the room every time. What has it been like for you, or how has motherhood influenced your politics?
My son, I think a couple of months ago, asked me, it was during the height of load shedding and things were just not going okay. And he asked, he's a teenager, he says, "Mom, will we have a country 10 years from now?" I was shocked. I was taken aback to say, okay, here is a generation that is asking this generation who's bestowed with protecting their future, whether or not are we able to take care of it? Because in essence, that's what he was asking. And it simply said, I asked myself, how many other children feeling this? He's feeling this possibly from a point of privilege because mom can still provide. Imagine the child in the shack who's going through this or sees the mother who has to wake up 5 o'clock in the morning, is subjected to the darkness or inflation and all of that. So as a parent and as a mother, the first point of contact is you need to protect your family. Mothers don't think for themselves. So I don't think of my pocket when I've got a cough, whether I like it or chocolate. I know I need to share with something. It's instinctive. We are the ones who understand the cost. Why is it so bad that eggs would cost so much? Fish oil. A mother knows how to change and feed 8 people in the family. That's the reality of a lot of Black women. She's the one who has to take a decision between buying whether sanitary towels or bread. And guess what? She'll buy bread and find other ways to deal with that. That's the inherent nature, the nurturing nature of mothers. And the fact of the matter is that the majority of households are headed by women, African women mostly. And their realities are normally seen as side issues, or let's not think about it. And for RISE Mzansi to actually speak so boldly about some of the things that are seen as trivial, female issues, part of that community, it's important. It's part of a policy narrative change. It's changing the culture of politics. Yesterday, I was hosting single mothers in Katlehong, where I come from. I was pleasantly surprised with the turnout, but also the engagement. Mothers worry about the fact that we've got substance abuse in our communities. These are our children. How do we solve it? They worry about the basics, cleanliness, hygiene, because they understand the implications of that. The mother's the one who cooks, so she'll be the first to understand that without having water or water that is dirty, my children are going to be impacted or affected. So she'll wake up 4 o'clock in the morning, try and boil water to ensure that at least my children have some kind of healthy water. That is the reality. And people are holding this economy, people are holding, society for dear life. It's Black women. And the fact that they make up over 50% of the membership and volunteers in RISE Mzansi is so humbling for me. It simply says there's representation. And I would want another woman who's a single mom, who's a mother like myself, when they see uGugu, say, you know what, at least we've got someone who's khulumelai. At least we've got someone who understands where I come from. It's not something unique. Because even if you can afford certain things, you're still a single mom. It's a burden. I've had to choose going to a school meeting or sports than campaigning. I'm an activist. I'm a mother. I come back late. Some of these homeworks I can't do with my son. Those are the realities. So when you've got someone there, these are things you can raise. How do we ensure that we build a community or society that enables us to be able to get that support, but also be heard in terms of these issues that are seen as trivial? Because we've normalized a struggle of a Black woman to a point that you don't see anything wrong with a Black woman waking up 4 o'clock in the morning, taking a bus to work, and being in risk of violent crimes, or that she's a petrol attendant. You don't see anything wrong. She's the face of domestic work, exploitation, violence, because society has normalized that. But RISE Mzansi says that's not normal. These are the women we also need to represent at a policy level, at a political level, at a political level, but also be part of the decision-making structures within RISE Mzansi.
Yeah. And I think I like two things about what you've mentioned, the mention of single mothers and the realities of single mothers. Because RISE Mzansi has a policy that looks specifically, or policy proposals that look specifically at supporting single mothers, which is also part then of our manifesto. Our second pillar about the individual and the family well-being.
Yes.
But I also like that, you mentioned earlier on that you criticize the idea of having women's leagues because women should not have their own corner there where they can talk about their issues. Women's issues should be at the main table. And what I like about that is that then the single moms policy proposals were actually championed by Makashule Ghana, who is a man.
Right.
And
A
that's what
feminist, for that
that's what
matter.
happens
Yes.
when you do not push women's issues to the side, is that you also have a leadership culture where men don't get to sit back and let
Yes.
only women speak about women's issues, but everyone comes to the table to say, what are the issues in our society? And how do we
Yeah.
make sure that we create policy interventions that protect the most vulnerable, that protect the most marginalized, without them being a thing that's only discussed at a women's conference.
Correct.
But I want us to go back a little bit to that comment by Mam Mzamo Aduns. I said Mamzo earlier, apologies. I'm exceedingly impressed by RISE Mzansi's humility and its leadership simplicity. Keep it up, guys. Politics doesn't have to be complicated.
Yes.
I know that. And over the past couple of months, having been at RISE Mzansi, I've heard that a number of times. But I think it shocks me, or maybe not shocks me, but it still confuses me that a lot of us don't know what a different politics can look like. A lot of us have just been so traumatized by the way that we have done politics in South Africa. I was at a debate earlier this week where our premier candidate in Gauteng, Vuyiswa Ramokgopa, was speaking. It was hosted by the Star. And as per the brief, you were allowed 5-6 political party representatives per party. Of course, you had a situation where the ANC and MK had a lot more parties, and there were others as well. I'm not going to mention names, but they had a lot more than what the brief asked for. And now you have a situation where there's chaos. The moderator is struggling to lead the conversation, and we ended up having to cancel the engagement because there's a security risk. And that's all I know politics to be. As you know, a young person born in the 90s, that's all I've seen politics being modeled as in South Africa. What does it mean to you to change the political culture of this country? And what is our responsibility as young people, to, number one, young people who want to be in politics, who are in the political space, what is our responsibility when it comes to changing this political culture? What does it look like?
Okay, firstly, I'll say people who thrive on anarchy are usually people who don't have anything to offer. So anarchy usually closes those gaps for them because it's confrontational and it reduces you to mudslinging and you lose sight of the issues. And if you look at the past 15 odd years of South African politics, that's what we've reduced it to. I'm not saying some have not raised issues, but even just the aesthetic of South African politics. And I always say, please just define a revolutionary today. What is being revolutionary? And trust me, people are like, no, they must chant a certain way, have this accent. So it's never about, no one speaks about someone championing or advocating for an issue, but it's always the aesthetic around it. To say, this is a revolutionary, quote Marx, even if it's pigeon Marxism or whatever, you sit there like, no. If you're a protagonist of social, that's just become the aesthetic. Purely because that has been the orientation of politics. And we've not moved from that, because if you look at it generationally, it has descended from a certain generation and it's proliferated down to even, youth structures and so forth. Even what is perceived to be someone who's revolutionary is a certain way, right? But what I would say to any young person is that political activism is not a liberation movement exclusive, right? Political activism is necessitated by time and space and what is required of you at that time. We necessarily need to change the political culture because we've realized that this culture of popularity, personality cult politics, confrontational politics has not led us anywhere. We've got a high rate of unemployment. We've got serious class and race inequalities. We're a highly divided nation. But for us to bring this new or reorientation of political culture, we have to be steadfast and also be representatives of this new culture. So no matter how difficult it is, whether you patronized or whatever, but the crux of the matter is that you want to change it, reorientate it. Even those who started the liberation movement at that time had to change things. They had to organize, for example, Africans beyond tribes, beyond this, that, and a third, because there was a collective responsibility to move forward. So at any point, anyone who represents RISE Mzansi must remember that I've got a responsibility to be the champion of this new culture. I've got to be the person who champions what it means to say, I'm going to raise issues. So even if Dimpho comes and says, and she starts screaming and insulting me, the first thing you have to say is that, look, I need to rise above this. Because society will start actually seeing that distinction to say, look, I cannot entertain this kind of politicking. I want to raise this specific issue. So if there's anarchy, you know that you withdraw, you're not going to entertain it. Because that's not what RISE Mzansi stands for. When people start insulting, try and redirect back to the issue. And it starts even with everyone, volunteers, field organizers, the youth chapter led by Lawrence, anyone. There has to be that distinction, because even the same organizations that have reduced themselves to these factional politics, to these personality politics, at some point they had a culture that allowed them to lead society. Now society has gravitated away, in fact, has moved away. What is it that society no longer resonates with? You cannot blame third parties and what do they say, agents, forces, white monopoly capital. The question is, as an organization at some point that led society, how come is it that you've alienated so many people who've regressed to tribal movements or race-based organizations, and people cannot resonate with that? And this is where we should say RISE Mzansi still believes in being able to build a safe, prosperous, and united South Africa where different races, where different cultures, and different people can still find expression here on the basis of issues that affect South Africa. And that is why we call ourselves a social orientated organization, but one that is solutions-based. It's people-centered. So it has to be centered amongst South Africans, whether it's one from the Western Cape or one in Katlehong. They must find expression in RISE Mzansi. So it's not an easy task, but it's necessary. It's hard work, because that's the essence of building an organization, more especially if you have ambitions of reorientating the political culture.
Yeah. I like what you're saying about South Africans moving away from the politics of the day and just the current political culture. And the numbers don't lie. You know, when you look at the voter turnout in 2021, it was the worst since 1994. It was completely dismal. I think it was the lowest youth voter turnout that we've seen in a democratic South Africa. And so people who voted before are now choosing to stay away from voting, and there's a reason why people are kind of opting out of politics. And it's because people want to do politics differently. People want a politics that actually impacts their lives.
And
that
you
has
know what I find so interesting now, Dimpho, just on that point, is that
yeah,
you have the most undecided voters for the first time. You know, when you speak to someone,
yeah,
they're willing to listen. And, you know, I've heard everyone say, no, 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 people already know. Some people actually don't know. They
yeah,
are highly undecided. And it shows that something is missing. You know, someone
yeah,
is missing issues in politics, because if it wasn't the case, people would still be getting majority votes. That's a
yeah.
matter of fact.
Definitely. And the fact that South Africans who had voted before are choosing to not vote is them saying there is no one in the current political establishment who speaks to
Exactly.
me. There is no one who speaks to, like you're saying, my issues. And that's what South Africans want to hear more of. One of the comments, again, that we get on social media is that, yo, we're a statements political party. We release the statements every day of the week. But if
I
you
hope.
read those statements, they actually make reference to issues with facts, with solutions,
Or
right?
maybe they're not used to that. You know, in this culture, it's always things that gain traction is the insults, or a leader said this to that leader, but it's not issue based or just responding to realities in South Africa. So maybe it's like, where do you guys come from? You always have something to say, and it's important. We're a political
Yeah.
organization. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's part of changing the culture and doing things that are new and are surprising. But I
Yeah.
think that if you do it long enough, people actually begin to see the vision. People actually begin to see the purpose of why you do. Someone said the other day when we put out the post of our youth town hall,
Yeah.
Libatuli town hall. Like every you guys, one thing about you guys, you're gonna have a town hall. And I don't know if they meant that, you know, as an insult, but it was kind of affirming to me because
Yeah.
I like the fact that there is a commitment to
And they
create spaces
noticed.
of engagement. There is a commitment to create spaces where there can be a multiplicity of voices. And RISE Mzansi's leaders can also make themselves accessible and available to their
And the fact
constituents.
that all our policies were actually proposed in people's
Yeah,
assemblies and town halls. So it wasn't something that was disseminated, but people had an opportunity to engage, you know, and that's a good thing. You don't see that anymore.
yeah, yeah, I agree. We've spoken about motherhood influencing your politics.
Yeah.
I want to speak to you about being a woman in political leadership. And you know, it's I know it can be a bit of a sensitive issue. But the reality is that whether you're in politics, in business, in corporate, space is not the same, and the playing field isn't level when you are a woman. Take me through the experience of being a woman, but not just a woman in politics, being a woman who actually challenges the status quo, being a woman who makes the bold decision to time and time again speak up against leaders, and speak up against you know, people that other people want to have proximity to,
Yeah.
and actually being the person to say this shouldn't be happening, and people need to be held accountable, because people don't expect women to do that.
You
Yeah,
know, to be quite honest with you, even some of the people that shut you down are women. So women don't become inherently progressive by virtue of being women. No, some women don't even believe in feminist ideas. And you find that you get isolated. That's a matter of fact. For being that woman who decides to speak the truth or move away. But what I've learned is that standing your ground will actually earn you respect. So even those who don't like you, the crux of the matter is that they'll know that, okay, this one has this position and this is what she stands for. And it's sad because, even if you look at the political space, even the attacks first become the fact that you're a woman. Look at how many women have been, demonized, or you find that they history or life becomes displayed in public and all that. You don't get that with men. And people are like, oh, this woman represents who? So if you're not a woman who's connected to, a group of men or something, then clearly your voice doesn't matter. But as I've said, it's earned me respect, but it also comes with a lot of sacrifices. You get isolated, definitely. You will get marginalized and at times shunned for the things that you speak about, even if they're truth, you know. But it's necessary. It's the harsh reality, because in the same breath, you inspire a lot to speak up as well. And if you look at it generationally, this has transcended. You've got a generation of very confident, powerful women now. It had to start somewhere. The likes of Mamuni Mandela were isolated, they were shunned, they were frustrated because the status quo believed that how dare you speak that? How dare you raise your views and so forth. And more especially if you're a Black woman, it's just even harder. You then supposedly very angry, you bitter, there's something wrong with you. You shouldn't be saying these things. But with more women coming out and being expressive, getting into politics, getting into business, it shows that at some point it has to normalize. I remember the question that they asked Deputy Chief Justice, Justice Mai, who's now standing to be Chief Justice. And they said, do you think South Africa is ready for a female Chief Justice? And it's a ridiculous question, because for the longest, women have been there, not as participants, they've been actively involved, whether it's politics, government. Women have played a major role in terms of shaping democracy or the democratic dispensation in South Africa in various roles that they've played. But constantly, you have to be questioned. Why are you doing this? I mean, with me joining RISE, like, what happened? Someone must be paying you. What is it? And no one believes that you can make an independent decision, or you can independently articulate or think there must be someone who's doing these things for you or is influencing you. As I've said, you're seeing more women who are actively participating, and that's great, to a point that it shouldn't be made to be abnormal. And not just participating, women have to occupy key strategic positions that influence policy, that influence direction. So it can't be a statistic to say you've got 60% women who are members of parliament or in business, but it seems as if it's malicious compliance and not something that actually contributes, or to say this woman actually is a secretary general, or this woman is a president of this, or is the chairperson. And when decisions are taken, she can actually veto the decisions or say, look, we're going a different direction, without being insulted or questioned, So, yeah, I think more women, I mean, one of the independent candidates in South Africa is Anele Mda, I think you know her, boldly came out and became an independent candidate. RISE Mzansi in highly contested provinces has ushered in capable women. Vuyiswa Nonkulego, KZN and Gauteng are highly, highly contested. But it shows also the confidence that RISE Mzansi has in women who are capable, experienced, skilled, and have proven their salt in many sectors or various aspects of their lives where they've been leaders in their own right.
I was telling someone this week that I love being led by women, and it's part of the reason I love being at RISE Mzansi. The fact that women are represented, youth are represented, and so as a young woman, as someone who lives at that intersection, I constantly feel seen. Even when there are issues that are raised, I'm like, I didn't think about that, and I didn't see it as a policy issue, but as a young woman who is struggling, I mean, last week, I believe it was, Faiza Lok, one of our
But I
NLC
was
members.
about, can we give her her flowers?
I,
Faiza Lok is unmatched, you know?
she
I love
released,
her energy, but
yeah,
also
she
just the
launched,
issues that she raises and
yeah,
advances at a policy level are very important, speaking to a constituency that's always been neglected, you know? And she
yeah,
goes out there and raises them, places them on the table in Tembisa, in other areas, Orange Farm, and she's steadfast. So I respect and admire her work ethic and just how she boldly does this without being apologetic about it or wanting people to, you know, advocated for it on her behalf. So
yeah.
it's very humbling. Yeah.
And I mean, she launched the menstrual equity policy.
Mm.
And it was so striking for me because as a woman, I never imagined that some of the issues that or the challenges that I faced, even at that intimately,
Yeah.
some things that can actually be like advanced at a
Mm.
policy level. You know, she
Mm.
speaks about menstrual
Mm.
leave and that having to
Mm.
be legislated. And I thought, absolutely. But we
You
need
know?
more people who look like us, who
Mm.
experience life, who experience this country the way that we do,
Mm.
in order to champion those issues at that level.
And
But
just
speaking,
by raising this, it shows the brutality
yeah,
of capital, that it's normalized women just going about and not being compensated by the system or assisted by the system. The whole single parenting thing, the menstruation policy. And these things that I just know they don't affect, but they do impact women quite severely. And it's politics, you know. We just don't see our issues as politics because they've never been raised as political issues. And when you start raising them, it's like, no, that is how things will always work. But they
mm,
shouldn't be, you know. Whoever thought we would be at this place where women can equally access job opportunities? At some point, it was unheard of. So if you start having champions like Faiza Lok, it becomes very important that they are placed in the table. And who knows, it will might end up being legislated in Parliament, you know. So yeah, it's exciting.
yeah, very exciting. And
Mm.
speaking about women, you are also an author. And you wrote a fiction book called All in a Girl's Life.
I wish I had. Oh, let me quick. I'm gonna grab a cover
Please.
quickly. Uh, it's a very girly book. Here it is.
Yes, I love it. Because, and I didn't want to read too much about
Yeah.
what the book is about because I wanted you
Mhm.
to let us in on that story. But I also remember you saying, you know, that this was almost like an expression for you,
Mm.
and you expressed yourself through these five women who are a part of the story. So just take us through, you know, that process of deciding
Uh,
to author this
someone
book
used to
and
say,
publishing, and let us in on maybe what it's about without giving away too much.
okay, someone used to say, every time you speak about this book, you just glow, smile. And the
We see
reason
it.
is, you know, when you've been in politics for the longest of time, you write about current affairs, people don't think there's another side of you, right? And you know, we human, we women, we hurt, we go through life realities. And I think that's also what I like about RISE Mzansi, that it doesn't box you into something. You can be expressive as you can. It's important that people understand that there's all facets of humanity, given the emphasis on care, you know. So it became my form of escape and therapy. I write a lot, I diarize things that I go through. And it actually wasn't meant to start off as a book, it was just journaling, right? And I sent these to a friend, and a friend said, you know what, you can actually write this as a book. But what I realized is that it was an expression of things that I've gone through in these different characters. So the extreme part of myself, or the happy part of myself, the single mom part, all of those things are incorporated into these women. So it's Portia, Matlakala, Kate, and Mandisa, as well as Terry. And they come from different backgrounds, but they've got a friendship. So, you know, they've been together for the longest of time. And as they grow, they face these challenges. One is faced with the stigma of being HIV positive. The other one's also single parent. The other one fights consistent zina abusive, violent relationship and all of that. So it just gives you a sense of what women go through, more especially my age group, where there are certain things that you hide from. There's a stereotype about how life should be, and you find yourself now dealing with different realities. I'll give an example about myself. At some point, I said I would never be in politics again. I did not know I would be in politics. I had an idea of how life would turn out. But there's so many that are struggling with that sense of identity. You get to a point where you're frustrated with your career and you're like, no, I don't think I should have been doing this. Or you thought life would turn out a certain way and you start becoming angry about how things have turned out and you feel wronged or betrayed that, you know what, I was not given this script, you know. And we're dealing with realities of late of, you know, you've got these young women who are living certain, you know, luxurious, opulent life. There's a generational gap. Someone would have said, you know, I thought if I got educated and I did this, I would live a comfortable life. And you find that that's not the reality. What happens when they see a younger woman who's living the life that they've always espoused? Things like that. And these are things that are within our generation. And also generational traumas, really bittersweet relationships we have with parents because life turned out a certain way, or you felt maybe a parent could have played a bigger role than they did. You know, so those are things that I write about through this fiction. It's easier to write about someone else than yourself. It's also therapy. You know, we were not taught to go to therapists earlier or that you'd speak to someone. So writing also becomes my form of therapy and how I heal with certain things that I've been through personally in my life. And I love it for that because it's just, you know, I go through it. I don't restrict myself in terms of writing, and anything that I want to put through, I put through the characters. So I've neglected this baby for so long because of every other thing that has gone through. But I believe everyone must follow their passions wholeheartedly, irrespective of where they find themselves. I'm definitely going to publish a second sequel. It's in editing, and I want to launch it August Women's Month. Because I've realized that the first book actually helped other women out there to say, look, I've read your book and I feel I resonate with some of the characters in it. Yeah.
So I'm going to sponsor a copy of
Yeah.
All in the Life. The first person to send us a DM. I'm not sure if you're watching on YouTube, on Twitter.
A signed copy. A signed copy.
A signed copy, okay, by the author and RISE Mzansi's national spokesperson. So the first person who just DMs and says, hi, this is my name, and I would like a copy of All in the Life. 100%. And I can't wait to read it myself. And I think to read that side of you. And I absolutely love what you say about how when you're a woman and you're in politics and you're constantly talking about politics and current affairs, people tend to think that that's
the beginning and end of you.
That's all there is. That's all there is. Even when people meet you in social settings, that's all they want to talk about. You know,
and you're like, no. Can I tell you a joke? I said, please. You know, if ever I get married, can they not be in politics? I hope it's someone who's just completely out of the space. So that when I get home, I'm speaking gibberish and he's like, can tell me about, oh, you know what? I heard this song. You know, I don't need this.
Right? And we don't have to dissect and discourse.
No. I mean, already at the office, you're living this. You've got people that call you on this in WhatsApp groups, and all you just want to do is get home, and someone says, "Oh, the weather was great. I did art today. Yay!" You know,
yay! Do you want to try out this new bottle of wine?
Please, you know.
I understand what you're saying 100%. And I think I have intentionally kind of curated even my friendship group in such a way that I can just like have some time to not think about statements. And
which there's a campaign tomorrow. You just hold it together.
Yeah. I mean, and you know, one day when we have time, we'll talk about how consuming this work can be, you know, and how it then necessitates that you have people in your life who can support you, who can hold you, who can be understanding, and who can be patient. I mean, you mentioned earlier on that your mom is a diehard member of the ANC, but I'm sure in her own way, you know, she is still able to show up for you.
She's a mom. Yes, she's a mom first. Definitely. Yeah.
Yes.
You know.
I I want us to wrap up the conversation
Okay.
with a message from you. Oh wait, Frida says, when you're done with the book, can I put it on stage as a play? Because while you're speaking about it, I am currently visualizing the story. Look at that, RISE Mzansi's
You
first
saw
production.
Shonda Rhimes in the making right there, right? You never
It,
know.
you heard it first here on Fireside Chat.
Netflix.
I love that idea, Frida.
Yeah.
I think that you would absolutely make magic. But in us wrapping up, Gugu,
Yeah.
we are just 5 days. We're a couple of hours, to be honest, from from what many people have called the most important election
Yeah.
since 1994, an election that really is going to determine whether or not we have a country that we are able to rebuild. And like what you have said throughout the conversation, a country that our children can inherit, a
Yes.
country that our children can be proud of. We're in
Mm.
an election that stands to change a lot and introduce things like coalitions, possibly at a
Mm.
national, even provincial level. And we all need to show up. You know, one of the things our national leader Songezo says is that democracy is a contact sport. You can't participate from home. You have to physically be there. You have to bring your body to the party,
And
and
Eugene, hey?
vote and make your voice heard. But democracy
Mm.
is also a team sport.
Yes.
We all need to participate in order for this
Participate.
thing to work
Correct.
the best way
Mm.
that it can. I want you to send a message to number one, young people who want to vote. Like you said,
Mm.
a lot of undecided voters. And I want you to tell them why they need to consider RISE Mzansi as a
Yeah.
political alternative and why they need to vote for RISE Mzansi on the 29th of May. But I also then want you to speak about young people who maybe like you have only known one political organization all their lives and can feel this tension,
Mm.
you know, that there is a need for change, but
Mm.
might be a little afraid to show up and to vote differently.
Okay. I'm going to repeat a line I said earlier. That's going to be context for those who are afraid. And I said political activism is not a liberation movement exclusive. So there's no party that has exclusive rights because of its history with regards to political activism. It's a generational necessity. To the young people who are at home, this is your future that old people are gambling with. This is your future that is being destroyed. When you say we've got a debt of 500 billion or whatever, that is a debt, unfortunately, that you are going to carry because some are going to be gone in the next 5 to 10. They're not coming for the next election. It's going to be your responsibility. At this point, it's not, politics is not for politicians, it's for citizens, it's for South Africa. South Africa is for all of us. Change is not easy, but it necessarily needs to happen. Time and space is calling us to actually do something. So if you don't get out on the 29th of May, you are complicit in what is currently happening. You are saying yes to the realities that you're confronted with. You are saying yes to unemployment. You are saying yes to queuing with a degree and getting 350. That is not sustainable. So when you look at RISE Mzansi, see an opportunity for a credible political alternative, but also for people who are committed. One thing I can tell you, RISE Mzansi has committed new leaders who want to change the current political discourse. They are going there wholeheartedly. Some have left their jobs, some have left their comforts, some have left things that they've known purely because they want to build an organization for future leaders, for future young people to come in and say, we want to change this country. I am tired, for the life of me, I'm tired of hearing about 60-year-olds, 80-year-olds, what they did in exile. We understand, but at this point, we need a future. We need people who are going to think innovatively about South Africa, change the economic discourse of South Africa, but also do it wholeheartedly and ensure that South Africans have a future, more especially as young people.
Gugu, thank you so much. I'm not going to add to that. I think that ended off this conversation so powerfully, but I think thank you for making the bold decision to leave the comfort and to come and do the work that your country needs you to do. We
This
often
leadership
speak about,
academy.
yes, this leadership, leadership academy, this
This
leadership
is,
incubation.
yeah,
We often speak about building a country, a South Africa that is safe, prosperous, equal, and united.
in one
And I
generation.
in one
Mm,
generation. And I know
mm,
that there are some people who cannot even begin to imagine what that looks like just because
mm,
of how run down the country is, just because of how dysfunctional our country has been over the last couple of years. But
mm.
it's our responsibility to envision it and to work towards it because our country is worth fighting for. And I think
Yes.
on behalf of many
Mm.
women, Black women who are in this space for the first time. I think you are such a beacon of hope and a light and an inspiration, And again, thank you for making the bold decision to be in this space and to be a voice in this
It's
space.
tough. I'm not gonna lie. It is tough.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I can resonate. Let's offline on that. But thank you for your time. Thank you for this conversation.
Yeah.
And we will see you guys on the next episode of Fireside Chats. Thank you to everyone who's been sending us comments and questions throughout this session. We will have one last final chat before elections with the national leader, Songezo Zibi, where you'll be able to actually ask him any questions that you may have before the election using the hashtag. I'm not sure what the hashtag is. It might be hashtag Ask
We
the
need
Leader.
new leaders. We just said
Ask
we're going to
this leader. We're
elections.
still figuring it out, but you will be able to access that platform and just engage him for an hour. So do look out for that. But for myself and the incredible Gugu Ndima, thanks so much for watching. Good night.
Thank you.